So let's start by getting to know you. Tell us something about yourself, a little background about you, and where have you been born and brought up?
Okay, born and brought up in Mumbai. So I've been trained as a dental surgeon and never practiced a day in my life. Was very interested in the business of healthcare. Got into working for a few startups. One of them was funded by Sequoia. One of them was bootstrapped. Then one was acquired by our PSG group. Got to know about Talorang, so was a part of the PGCP program, which was for about a year. Through them, I worked with Dr. Vaidya's, which is a D2C startup, and then I worked with the Harvard Business School India Research Center. Again, some amazing times here. Had a great team in both of these organizations. After this, I worked with an investment bank for about a couple of years before I decided to move on and start some of my own projects. Currently, I run an investment firm. We trade in options majorly. I also am building a content e-commerce business, which is more so like the perfect store of the wellness space. I also am trying to work on a new idea in the licensing space, obviously learning from the IB experience, something in the pharma licensing space. And I also have a family business in construction, which I'm now getting the hang of. So, quite a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
But happy to be here.
Wow, that's interesting. I mean, so many things. How did you develop your interest in the healthcare industry?
Well, I think it just went from being, maybe I'm good at biology all the way to completing a degree in the space. But while I was in the industry, completing my undergrad, I read up a lot about everything healthcare. So, the entire entrepreneurship boom came in when I was in my undergrad, which is what led me to reading a lot of these articles about health tech companies and digital health and telemedicine and precision medicine and a lot of different technologies. Now, unfortunately, when you're in the practical side of it, you get to experience very little of the technological advancements, which is what really, kind of made me jump beyond where I was and get into the entire space, which really interested me, which was the technology part of healthcare. So I think that's where the interest developed, and obviously when you're in the space, you seem, and the stuff that you really like, you seem to get better at it, which then leads to you liking what you do, right? So I think that's how it developed for me, a very old school way, but yes, I think that got me where I am.
So have started your business, your own company by the name Failure Hack, right? What was your inspiration?
Failure Hack is, Failure Hack is, it's an interesting project that I started with with a childhood friend of mine. Essentially, what we do is we interview entrepreneurs, also professionals sometimes, where we ask them about, so typical interviews, right? Typical interviews go with, the primary question being, what are you successful at? We've kind of flipped that entire thing, and we asked them, what have you failed at, and how did you really overcome that, right? And we've had some, fabulous conversations with entrepreneurs, some companies almost on the verge of bankruptcy, and then they've got a jump, right? And these are really inspiring stories. Frankly, personally for me, they're much better than the success stories that you hear. It really develops some form of thought process when you hear all of these conversations. So again, it's not a business, but it's definitely something close to my heart. Yeah.
That's a very interesting thought process to start something like this, because we do not know what a person goes through when he's successful. And I think
for sure. And I think, you learn so much from understanding what a person goes through when they're successful. You frankly learn a lot more when you learn how they failed, and they failed terribly. Like if you hear the stories, you'd be amazed at somebody who has that kind of emotional endurance to even bear that, let alone the financial endurance that comes with being almost bankrupt. But yes, I think interesting conversations if you want to check that.
So you did the Wiley program with Talorang, and how did how did the program help you with your career aspirations?
Well, so, like I mentioned, right, I frankly never thought that I was prepared for something beyond what I studied, although I tried to kind of claw my way up when it came to the entire startup race. But it really kind of felt, there's always that gap that, okay, probably I'm not trained enough to do this, or maybe I would have done better if I had formal training for it. Now the problem here was that I did not want to leave work entirely and jump into education. So what I thought was that this program would be interesting, not only from a perspective of learning, but I always kind of put my mind to more of an MBA-like program, right? And this was probably the closest while I prepared for the next step. The PGCP program had obviously all graduates, which is a criteria for entry. But it also had very interesting backgrounds, right? So there were people from teachers to engineers to bankers to real estate agents, right? And all of these were interesting experiences to kind of have in one classroom when you're discussing a case. That being said, I think it also kind of made a lot of sense because having that experience gave me something which was probably the closest I can come to an MBA program before I actually enrolled for one, and that really helped. The other bit that helped was, of course, the two internship-like roles that we did. So for me, firstly, working in the startup space, I thought it might just make sense for me to kind of work in another startup, but in a different domain, which is where the first company came in. But more importantly, I also wanted to understand what all can be done in healthcare. Now, the problem is that, as a business model, there are very few in healthcare. And the problem is that everybody is quite aware of them. I wanted to learn something which was not healthcare, but could be, translated into it, right? So that's where I thought the HBS internship might make sense. I was doing business research for probably every industry out there across South Asia. I was learning how the pay-as-you-go model works in solar energy, to how venture capitalists think, to why the steel prices go up, to why a company goes into bankruptcy, right? So I was pretty much all across. And what that really helped me on the back end was that I really was able to understand which of these things can be put into healthcare, right? And that really is, by the way, one of the angles where the pharma licensing business is coming up, or where the content business is coming up. These are just new angles in healthcare, but not really new business models. They've been implemented elsewhere. I'm just bringing them to healthcare. That's it.
Is there any moment that you specifically remember from the Wiley program?
I'll go a step further. Instead of the program, I'll tell you about the interview I had with Shweta. So this is essentially the interview for the program, right? And we met at some club in South Bombay, and we were just, over a cup of coffee discussing why this makes sense. And I think it really gave me perspective. And luckily, I've had the chance to work with both the Rainas. I'm not sure if you're aware, but HBS is led by Anjali ma'am, who's Shweta's mom. So having the experience to work with both Shweta and Anjali ma'am actually gave me a very interesting perspective. Their thought process is something which is very unique in a way that, we seem to think about stuff in a very leveled format, right? So you're thinking probably a week from now or probably a year from now. They're thinking maybe 100 years at least, right? They're trying to do something huge. I mean, Talerank's vision itself is to empower a few million, grads across India, and that's not a small goal when you think about it. Right. But Shweta's made it quite quantifiable, which makes it achievable, right? And that's pretty much something I believe she's learned from Anjali ma'am. Working with the two of them has really given me a sense where if you're able to quantify something, it's not that big, right? And that really gave me a very good learning throughout life. So when somebody asks me how the hell are you going to run for businesses, I'm like, there are people running 19, so I don't think sport is that big of an issue right now. So yeah, that's really probably the best moment of my life. Has been actually two moments of my life have been working with Anjali ma'am and then working with Shweta.
Take away from the program, like from the Wiley program, that still stays with you today?
Well, so I mean, before I joined the program, I was a bit apprehensive because when I was in the program, that was my third role out of college within 2 years, right? And I really thought that I'm probably not making a good impression because when it looks, what it looks like on a resume might be somebody who just likes to jump, right? Now, when I joined the program, one of the first discussions we had was how somebody in my generation would have 19 jobs, at least, right? And that, that number keeps on increasing generation to generation, right? That really gave me a sense of comfort because I felt that I was probably not doing the wrong thing. I probably was still on the right track, or maybe if something that's gone bad, I can bring it back to normal and then create a story around it. Essentially, what I'm trying to say is that it was a very good comfort space for me to learn different things. But more importantly, the interactions that I had were more that gave me the confidence to pursue stuff going forward. So I was never, obviously, it helps with my entire fear of not being educated enough in the space. So essentially, not having a business degree made me feel incompetent sometimes before that, but obviously with this program it helps. But more importantly, it really made me feel that okay, there's a lot to explore out there, but if I keep being limited to the fear of what may, I might not get where I am. So probably I think that's the best bit for anybody who's listening to this, or for any of the alums or the current students. I would say that don't look at this from a perspective where you have to become the CEO of a company, right? I think what the pandemic really gave us is a very big hit when it comes to your senses of where you really want to be. Do you want to work, 18 hours a day and be at probably one of the best investment banks in the world, earn millions of dollars, but half of that you're actually giving up as medical bills? Is that the kind of life that you want? Probably not, right? I mean, any sane person would want to be healthy first and then be rich. So it gave me perspective as to how I want to divide my day. One of the things I'm working towards is having a 6-hour workday. So my intention between the 4 businesses is only going to work for 6 hours a day, 5 days a week. Still building onto how I'm going to do that, but that's the goal. Let's see how that comes out. So yeah, I think that's about it.
I really like this 6 hours a day and 5 days a week. I think that's perfect.
And that's the goal as an employee and as a businessman, frankly.
So lastly, is there any advice that you'd like to give to students who are just starting off with college?
With college, okay. So undergrad, the suggestion would be explore as much as possible. I don't care if you've taken a bachelor's in accounting and finance, go do something in marketing. I don't care if you've done something in dentistry, go take up a business course, right? You cannot really limit what you're doing. You cannot understand where the next boom is going to happen. Luckily for me, the boom was in health tech, which is something that I was always interested in and was able to get into. But somebody who's an engineer currently working at an IB might not see that the next revolution is going to be in technology, and they probably might be left out. So don't really jump entirely out of what you're studying. Obviously, be very aware of what you're doing there and get good grades, because for starters, that's a very important thing. But I really don't think you should limit yourself to the classroom. And I think there's a lot out there to explore. Probably go for a couple of these, ISIC trips for all I care. Make good network across the globe and learn how to communicate. I think that's 50%. So I've worked as an employee for 4 years, and now I'm starting off in the space of business. But one thing that has really helped me, which I have specifically noticed being a problem for probably the brightest minds who haven't really been able to succeed, is the fact that they're not able to communicate well. I think this conversation is something that a lot of the people out there might not be able to, structure or speak on the spot. Again, this is not a structured conversation. So it's very important that you learn how to communicate. I just don't mean communicate in a single language, but communicate with people across the globe. Days typically for me at the IB started off in Korea and ended in California, right? But how you're able to communicate with them is very important if you want to make money. And, that is, of course, part of the goal. I would say that you really need to learn how to communicate well. How do you structure your thoughts? How do you convey what you want to the person sitting across the table from you? That is very important. Somebody who's going into postgrad, I really think that it's time that you learn a lot more hands-on. So probably somebody who's going for a MS or an MBA, just makes sense for you to network a lot and obviously then get practical experience while you're in the program. So yeah, that's